Hey everyone, welcome to The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. We are also part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth, and our mission is to bring you the real news each and every week, multiple times throughout the week. And we release a ton of content that includes stories told through the eyes of our amazing field messengers, which I'll tell you more about in just a bit. We have in-depth news coverage that the team and I work on for you guys, where we take some headlines you may have seen and we go a little bit further in depth. And we also have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. They are our team that knows exactly what's going on in this crazy battle of good versus evil that we are in the final stages of, which is really exciting. So if you haven't heard that story before, you are in for a treat. And we do have some updates from the GIA at the end of today's episode. If you want more information about who we are and what we do and our whole mission, you can go to our website, which is unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to right now is I like to call it a week in review podcast, if you will. I take the stories that we've discussed throughout the week. It's a great way to catch up on anything you may have missed. I'm basically just giving you guys highlights, okay? So it's also a great way if you want to share UNN with friends and family, because our content is first available exclusively to our members, and then about a week later, we do publish it on YouTube and Rumble. But you guys know how this whole thing works, right? This whole censorship thing. We post it. Maybe it stays up, maybe it doesn't. And, we do our best to get it out there, as quickly to you guys as possible. But if you want instant access to everything, again, head on over to our website and you can learn more about our membership. Regardless of how you have reached us and how you found out about us and how you're consuming the content, I always encourage you guys to think critically about any information you're given, not just through this podcast, not through our newscasts that go out, but for anybody, right? Any kind of information that's coming in, any videos you're watching, any other podcast, doesn't matter. Anything you're watching on TV, especially the stuff you're watching on TV, but really it's everywhere. There is misinformation. There is disinformation everywhere. And the only way to really know the difference is to turn inward, okay? You have something called discernment, which means you can discern fact from fiction. And the reason you can do that is because it's a frequency. And you can turn or tune, I guess, either way, into that frequency and be able to tell, is this going to be beneficial for me? Is this something that I need to hear, that I need to know more about? And the answer might be yes, the answer might be no, but it's for you and it's exclusive for you. And you can tune into that whenever you want. It just takes some practice. I know these are not skills that we learned about growing up in school or even at, various religious institutions, if your path took you down there. Like, we didn't hear about this stuff, but it's true. And humanity, or perhaps more appropriately, Homo sapiens, which you guys will learn more about if you're following the GIA reports, is very special. We're very special, and we have these incredible abilities that are now coming back online, which is why it's so important that you found us and that you really take what we say to heart, right? Do your own research, of course. But even if it seems, wow, this is totally different than anything else I've ever heard, I guarantee it will be. I guarantee. We've got some really important information coming up in the GIA report that I think a lot of us really had to think about, after Kim released it. And it really does put things into perspective. I know I'm really hyping it up today, guys, but I really had to sit on this one. And we'll get to it in just a second. But before we do that, first of all, I want to wish you guys a happy 2026. I know for a lot of us, myself included, 2025 was not my year. I was so glad to close the door on 2025. And I know our calendars are off and everything. I get all that. And perhaps part of it is a mindset. But the end of the year for me was just a I'm just going to say it, a humdinger. That's the first thing that popped into my head. It is a humdinger the last couple months of 2025. And so I have high hopes for 2026. I'm so glad 2025 is over. I want to wish you guys a wonderful, wonderful 2026. I'm so glad you're here with me today. And on that note, let's get going. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Kicking things off with our awesome field messengers. So field messengers are everyday people that go out in their community and they tell us what's going on. And that could be heartwarming stories. That could be stories, that are perhaps a little bit more newsworthy. Those could be more community-focused stories. Really, this is all about us getting to know each other. And, we've been told a lot of lies about each other, various countries. Oh, this country does this country does that. And a lot of it was just governments pitting us against each other. So we are here to break down those boundaries, those stereotypes, all that craziness, and just start talking to each other again. And we think you are the best person to talk about what's going on in your neighborhood. And so we would invite you guys to become a field messenger, kick the year off right by thinking about different stories in your neighborhood. And we do have a production team that is here to help you every step of the way. We have weekly production meetings that I usually attend. We've got a team of people that are there, part of the production, and other field messengers that can help you with stories. And we also have a Telegram group that you guys can join, ask questions. We can provide tips, all that good stuff. But really, this is just about you grabbing your camera, which is built into your phone, and showing us what's going on. Maybe include a little bit of video, a little voiceover, and then our team takes that and we put it together for you and we put it up on the news. So here are some of the stories this week that we were focused on. Amy out of New Jersey takes us to a food pantry, and this is a food pantry that we've been to before. What I really like about how Amy did this is sometimes when you go out on a story, there's actual multiple stories that you can get. So always think about that. And I believe that was the case with this story because Amy included this food pantry in another story she was working on, but she took two different angles. So this is the second report, and this is about the renovations that the food pantry is experiencing right now. They're really excited about it. There's a lot of stuff going on. They're expanding and just organizing their whole setup. They're also creating an urban hydroponic farm where no dirt is required. They can grow, I think they said up to 500 heads of lettuce a week. And then that's right across the street. And then they just bring it over to their food pantry. And obviously people in the community can benefit from it. They talked about having additional land, perhaps even some farmland. So their whole goal is to become self-sufficient, which is very different than what I typically think of when I think of a food pantry. I think of donations, which is nothing wrong with donations, but we don't want to be so connected to governments that may fail us, right? So it's fine for community support and all that kind of stuff, donations that way, but it's even better to become self-sufficient. So this was a great story about how one food pantry is doing that. All right, Annette out of Canada takes us to a local healer, which sounds like she maybe had an appointment set up with this local healer, and his whole system is about restoring balance and well-being through natural health, through energy work, through various guidance. He had a lot of posters up on the wall to really get to know the body. That's one of the big things with our so-called healthcare systems in today's world is that we know it's not really healthcare. We know they're really trying to keep us sick, as horrible as that sounds. And more of us are probably going to be visiting these more one-off, smaller community places. And I know for me personally, I've got a family of 6, my husband and I and our 4 kids. And for us right now, it is a matter of having enough finances to do that. Trust me, I would love to get out of the system because right now we have, we're part of a medical system, basically a group. And I would love to leave that altogether and just find holistic practitioners nearby where we live. And there will come a time in the very near future where the money that it takes to do that is not going to be an obstacle. So do you know where you would go? If you didn't have to worry about money, where would you go to find real healing? And we know that we can heal our bodies ourselves, but we're kind of in this transitional period where it might help, right, to visit someone else who knows a little bit more. So anyways, just something to think about. Thank you, Annette, for your story out of Canada. Toshimitsu out of Japan takes us to one of the world's oldest theatrical arts. So he takes us to this theater where he has performed something called No, but it's spelled N-O-H. And this blends storytelling, music, and dance to tell extraordinary stories, really, of the human experience. And like I said, it's one of the oldest theatrical arts in the world, about 1,300 years old, which takes us back to the 14th century. It is a form of prayer. And one of the interesting things, because he interviewed some people that do this alongside him, and one of the interesting things I found is that they say this focuses on the losers. And, I say that with a grain of salt because there's probably a little bit that's lost in translation here, because it's not about being a loser per se, but in a world that just focuses on winners, which we know our history is written by the winners, right? It's not, it's not necessarily the real history. It is the people that put together the books, and do all of that. And so I kind of view that is part of this whole experience, to focus on the kind of like the hero's journey a little bit. And, maybe it's not the person that is well known for winning or whatever, but it focuses on people that have had to overcome different struggles in their life and explores that, which I think is very beautiful. All right, Rick out of Arizona, he and his wife did a little bit of volunteering through the local Central Phoenix Church, and they had a food distribution and healthcare for their entire community. Really beautiful, reaching out to the community. They had free health checkups. Oh, I thought this was interesting. They offered free reading glasses, which if you think about it, yeah. I mean, our eyes go through a lot of, at least some of us, myself included. I'm even experiencing that right now, going through various reading glasses. And I know firsthand, if you can't read something, that's really going to set you back. And I never really thought about reading glasses as something that would be really good for donation purposes, but absolutely, why not, right? And one of the things that Rick pointed out is that one of his takeaways were these moments of connection where people in the community really felt seen. There were people there that said they hadn't had, a standard checkup in years. In fact, I believe this event helped more than 1,000 people. And it took place, I think, right before Thanksgiving. They said that they gave out more than 460 food baskets and turkeys. So how beautiful is that? Steve M., who is out of Canada, goes exploring for mushrooms in his area. And it was a little bit snowy, but you could still find stuff, right? He is out of Fort McMurray in Alberta, and he has a lot of knowledge about mushrooms. And we see different varieties. He goes out and he explores, and we see the various mushrooms in his area. I think we're just scratching the surface of exactly what mushrooms are and their benefit in the ecosystems that they exist in. In fact, one of the things Steve did mention is that they have a complete underground network where they kind of serve as the eyes and ears of nearby plants and vegetation. I just think they're extremely smart, and we know about some of the medicinal benefits from mushrooms as well. So very interesting, just a totally different take on mushrooms. I really appreciated it. All right, Sophia out of Germany takes us to the Krone Farm, which is just outside of Munich, and it is a sanctuary for circus animals. And it is basically a tribute to one of Europe's most famous circus families. It was one of the largest circuses in Europe. But what do you do when the animals aren't in the circus anymore. In fact, I don't think a lot of circuses are actually using animals anymore. So this is a beautiful place for them. They've got this amazing land. We saw camels and zebras and llamas and goats and even smaller animals as well. I can't remember all of them, chickens, things like that. But it really kind of makes you wonder what does happen when, the animals aren't in a circus anymore. And this is a beautiful place for people to learn and grow. They have different things for schools to come and, really get up close and learn more about the animals. Just a beautiful story. John out of Australia, it is bushfire season in Australia because they are in the southern hemisphere. So it is summer right now in Australia. And he is out in New South Wales, and there are some fires at the time when he was recording this. And he talks about these fires. He got some really good drone footage of this. And he also asks what I think is a very important question. And that's regarding cloud seeding. So most of us have heard of this term before. When you look up in the skies and you see a plane, and then there is this, what appears to be clouds or something coming out of the plane, right? And you look that up, and what they want you to believe is that that is cloud seeding technology, right? So we are seeding the clouds, allowing for it to rain more, to have a more healthy atmosphere and environment. But if you do a little digging, you will find that that is not necessarily the case. A lot of you guys have heard the term chemtrails. That's a whole other, rabbit hole that you can go down. But he brings up the interesting question, which is when we have these kind of seasons, right? These very dry seasons, if we really are seeding the clouds for more moisture, why isn't it used in these kind of situations? Why are we still sending out people and putting people in harm's way? Why aren't we just creating more clouds to rain? Right? Why is that not happening? I mean, it's a very good question. I'm sure you guys can kind of figure out the answer, but yeah, it seems like that would be much more beneficial, better for the environment overall. In fact, why aren't we being proactive and doing that before it turns into a fire? Just asking questions. All right, Stanislaw from Poland takes us to this beautiful memorial that takes place. This year was the 86th anniversary of World War II, and the city, which is called Tczew, the city is remembering an important moment from World War II. It's the destruction of a couple of different bridges, and the reason they were destroyed was to stop German forces. But as in any kind of war, right, there are casualties, and it's also very sad for the bridges, very beautiful bridges, right? So this is a ceremony to remember the heroes of that time and, people that were defending and helping in those wars. And, we know that there was a lot of innocent life that was lost in any kind of war, and that the wars are never really what they tell us that they're about. And speaking of World War II, we are going to dive into that much more in the GIA report. This is, quite a doozy today, as I mentioned earlier, and it does tie into World War II. And our final field messenger report is from Amy and Sue. They are out of Florida, and they go to Treasure Island for a world-class sand sculpting festival. And I love the name of the festival. It's called Sanding Ovations. Kind of like standing ovation, but sanding ovations. And this was really fun. So they bring in 300 tons of sand from Miami. Apparently there is a special mineral in the sand from Miami, and it's great for sculpting. It allows the sand to harden almost to the point of it being almost rock-like, so they can sculpt it. And I'm not going to do it justice, guys. You're just going to have to watch the video for this. But there were some incredible designs, and it even withstands the weather because it really becomes more like a rock type substance. And there's really no way for me to do it justice, guys. You're really just going to have to watch the video. But the designs were really incredible. All right, let's talk about some of the more in-depth stories that the team and I created for you guys this week. So we're kicking things off in India because they have rolled out 4 new labor codes. This happened on November 21st, so just a couple of months ago, and it replaces 29 older laws to modernize the system, simplify compliance, and expand protections. These reforms aim to streamline rules, reduce bureaucracy, and make hiring and operations more flexible, especially for large companies that now only need approval for layoffs if they employ more than 300 workers. Workers are promised clear contracts, guaranteed minimum wages, timely pay, and for the first time, Social Security for gig and platform workers.
The government now decides whether you're an employee or a worker. If you're a manual, technical, operational, or clerical, you get protections like fixed working hours, overtime pay, and leave encashment. But if you're in a managerial or supervisory role, you won't. Second, your PF, gratuity, bonus, overtime, and leave encashment will be calculated from one definition, which means your PF contribution or take-home salary may change depending on your salary structure. Third, fixed-term employees will now receive the same benefits as permanent staff, including gratuity after 1 year.
But critics are warning of weakened job security, expanded use of short-term contracts, and reduced bargaining power, fueling nationwide protests from trade unions who argue these changes undermine hard-won rights. Whether the reforms succeed will depend on real-world enforcement and how effectively both businesses and workers adapt to the new system. Monterrey, Mexico is often celebrated as a nearshoring and manufacturing powerhouse feeding the U.S. supply chain, but it's also facing a hidden crisis. Toxic emissions from factories are filling the air with heavy metals and fine matter, exposing working-class neighborhoods to lead, cadmium, arsenic, and greenhouse gases at levels that rival or exceed many U.S. states, leading to serious health risks like kidney damage, neurological problems, birth defects, and even cancer.
Monterrey is Mexico's industrial heartbeat, the city that manufactures the goods that keep North America running. But today, it's also the center of a public health crisis. Recent investigations show that Monterrey now has some of the worst air pollution levels in all of North America. Not because of cars, not because of traffic, but because of the industrial belt surrounding the city. Factories releasing heavy metals, particulates, and toxic emissions have created an environment where residents say they are, quote, breathing poison.
While factories producing steel, cement, auto parts, and even recycling U.S. hazardous waste are fueling jobs and economic growth, residents are bearing the environmental burden of that success, raising urgent questions about whether economic gains outweigh the mounting public health and environmental cost. Greece is caught in a storm over a major EU subsidy scandal, where investigations into fraudulent agricultural claims exposed organized networks and even public officials helping funnel money illegally. This led to arrests and frozen payments.
It started with administrative mismanagement. Audits from 2020 onward flagged suspicious land claims and major mismatches between declared farmland and satellite data. But officials ignored the warnings. By 2024, farmers had taken to the streets to demand answers. Attempting to avoid accountability, the government blamed EU approval issues, despite internal reports pointing to mismanagement in Athens.
As authorities recheck claims to prevent more fraud, hundreds of millions of euros remain tied up, leaving ordinary farmers unable to pay for essentials like feed and fuel. While corruption is finally being confronted, many farmers say they are being punished for crimes they didn't commit, fueling nationwide protests with tractors blocking roads and demands for emergency aid. Women sustain much of the global coffee industry, yet legal, financial, and cultural barriers keep them largely invisible in ownership, leadership, and profit. While these women harvest crops, manage processing, and shoulder household duties, many lack land titles or registration, blocking access to loans, government programs, and the rooms where prices and contracts are decided. Here's one woman's story.
Merida Nanduru grew up in this remote village where nearly everyone is a coffee farmer. But memories of her childhood here are tainted by the violence she saw the women in her community suffer. Merida says harvest season was the worst. Couples would fight over how to spend the money earned from coffee farming, and it led to a surge in domestic violence. Merida says that while the women did what she calls the donkey work of coffee farming, the planting, harvesting, pulping, and drying the beans, the men would swoop in to pick up the sacks full of dry beans and sell them, and they would control the money, often leaving the women without funds for their basic needs.
Now, there are some efforts that are helping to reshape this imbalance, such as cooperatives in Colombia and businesses in Uganda that pay premiums and help women become registered sellers. Proving collective action and targeted support can transform livelihoods. Still, access to finance and education remain major hurdles, and closing those gaps is essential to ensure women not only work in coffee, but share in its rewards. A 5-year federal waiver is letting major U.S. railroads use more automated safety technology and reduce how often humans must walk the tracks for inspections, sparking a heated debate between rail companies and unions. Railroads argue sensors and automated systems catch far more defects and allow early predictive maintenance without slowing freight. While unions warn machines can't replace human judgment, route familiarity, and the ability to spot subtle hazards like shifting ballast, rotting tiles, or vegetation. With aging tracks and bridges across the country, critics say relying too heavily on automation could create a false sense of security, making the balance between technology and human oversight a critical safety question. Here's one railroad inspector's opinion.
A track inspector gets a territory, and that's their responsibility. You were in charge of inspecting all of it and making sure that train traffic can move safely. There's something about having a small territory where you can become familiar with it, and you can start noticing subtle things that are hints to something major. That's where you almost want it, inspectors out there more, to get more familiar, not less.
Kenya's High Court has struck down parts of a national seed law that punished farmers for sharing and selling indigenous seeds outside licensed systems, ruling that criminalizing community seed exchanges and allowing government raids on seed banks violated constitutional rights. The law, originally created to stop counterfeit seeds and safeguard harvests, ended up restricting long-standing traditions where small-scale farmers save and trade seeds central to food security. But not everyone agrees.
There is no law in Kenya today that is discriminating against farmer-managed seed systems, or that is discriminating against farmers, or that is prohibiting farmers from selling, exchanging, or sharing their seeds. There is no such law. Cap 326 does not do that. Unless there is another law, it does not do that. There is no farmer who has ever been arrested for exchanging seed here in Nairobi. The problem that we have in this movement of organic agroecology, we have people who like to talk too much and they do very little.
Now, this decision removes penalties and forces the government to rethink how it fights fraud without undermining community seed systems, giving smallholder farmers room to preserve and use the varieties that feed their communities. Cargo bikes are transforming everyday transportation by offering a sturdy, low-emission alternative to cars for errands, school runs, and deliveries. Built with longer frames, stronger brakes, and sometimes electric assist motors, they make hauling groceries, gear, or kids practical in ways traditional bikes can't. But their success depends heavily on supportive city infrastructure like bike lanes and safe loading zones. And challenges remain around charging and battery safety for electric models.
You already know the score. Here in the U.S., cars rule the road. You're taking your life in your hand when biking alongside a giant truck or SUV. And protected infrastructure like bike lanes is still too few and far between. If bike advocates want more people to use electric cargo bikes, they have their work cut out for them. Most e-bikes, most bikes, period, are made in China. Prices are likely to go up as tariffs and trade wars escalate, and cities are cracking down on e-bikes, mostly related to excessive speed and defective batteries. The US government is making things harder too, slashing funding for bike lanes and protective infrastructure, and questioning the need to carve out space just for cyclists. And that could upend all this amazing momentum that we've seen in sales. The whole idea is ease of use. If governments make e-bikes too tough to own, then people are just going to drive their cars.
Still, cities show that when well planned, cargo bikes can ease congestion, support small businesses, and reshape how people and goods move through urban life. Childhood vaccine guidance in the U.S., once steady and universally understood, is suddenly shifting in real time. Federal recommendations are being revised, long-standing rules like hepatitis B at birth have been rolled back, and medical groups that once spoke in unison now openly disagree. For parents already navigating low trust in institutions, political polarization, strict school requirements, and even legal pressures in custody cases, this turbulence translates into uncertainty about whose advice to follow.
I take my daughter yesterday for her annual physical. The doctor tells us, hey, your daughter just turned 11 yesterday. She's due for the papilloma or the HPV vaccine. So I asked the doctor, okay, doc, you know what? I'm not too familiar with the vaccines. I would like to do some research. Didn't fucking acknowledge me, right? He didn't care. He didn't try to convince me. He says, well, if you don't vaccinate your daughter, she won't be able to go to school. The school district won't allow her to go to school, and we can no longer see her here. That's what the doctor tells me. How is that okay? So you mean to tell me that I have no other option? If I decide not to vaccinate my kids with one of your mandatory vaccines, my child can no longer go to public school and he can no longer get seen at the doctor's office? That's a red flag.
At a time when families want clear, evidence-based information and a chance to ask questions without being dismissed, the landscape instead feels anxious and uneven, leaving many unsure how to confidently make decisions for their children's health. Speaking of health, air pollution in India has become a year-round public health emergency that cuts life expectancy, fuels millions of premature deaths, and blankets major cities like Delhi in a toxic haze each winter, despite decades of attention. The crisis is driven by overlapping sources, including vehicles, coal plants, industry, construction dust, and stubble burning, while hospitals report spikes in respiratory illness and vulnerable groups bear the brunt. Public frustration is growing as officials downplay conditions and rely on short-term gestures like water spraying and cloud seeding, quote unquote, even as Delhi faces its worst air quality in 5 years.
It is so crucial to speak up because the air we breathe has become so polluted that living itself has become difficult.
We keep hearing about plans to reduce pollution, but it's only got worse over the years. Every government says they will do something, but the only thing they are doing is manipulating the data. Nothing is happening other than that.
India's National Clean Air Program has made little dent in major pollution sources, leaving residents demanding urgent, sustained action and reminding the world that transformation is possible only when long-term political commitment meets public pressure. Okay, now it's time for some updates from the Global Intelligence Agency, the GIA, and Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA. She gives us various updates throughout the week. Sometimes those are messages that go out through our Telegram channel, which, by the way, if you are not subscribed, if you're on Telegram, you can check out the CARE United Network Telegram channel. I believe we link to it on our website, so you can check it out there. That's always a great way to get the latest and greatest, especially if they're just texts that are going out. And then as much as possible, she does try to do videos for us to update us on a more in-depth level. Sometimes she brings out a whiteboard to explain things because the things that are going on in our world right now, most people don't know. They're just not aware of. And this is stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else, okay? And that includes this report that we're going to go over today because I had to sit with this. And I'm sure those of you who have already listened to the report in its entirety, which I do recommend that you do, I'm only giving you guys highlights here. I recommend that you do so and that you take notes and perhaps just sit with us a little bit, because we are taking our history and turning it upside down. And this has to do with the concept of time. We have a tendency to think about time in a very linear sense because that's how we experience our reality right now. But that is not how the multiverse experiences reality. Everything is happening in the now. So your past is happening in the now, in another place in time, so to speak, right? In quotes. Your future, or future in general, is happening right now. Everything is actually happening in the now, which means time travel is not only possible, but has had a huge impact on what we believe our history to be. This also ties into the history of what we call the deep state. Because if you can go back and forth in time, what we view as something that would have happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, if not more, could have kind of just happened if you can control time. And in a false world, in a matrix of their own design, at least that an AI created, that they had some ability to move back and forth in, you can do quite a bit. So this first soundbite that I want to play for you guys is about the deep state's attempt to control what we call the God particle, because that ties into this new year and things that would have normally happened that did not happen this year, and that they are just now learning that their plans have failed. So let's play this first soundbite. Here's Kim talking about the God particle and their attempt to control it.
As we discussed in our last report, they had these delusions of grandeur of a big reset that was due to happen on January 1st. They have been working on a very large operation tied to Cheyenne Mountain, Breckenridge, Silverton, Colorado, and Massive Mountain. Also a little area called Devil's Slide in Utah. And, of course, yours truly is at the middle in Durango, you know, bearing the brunt of many, many, many hours of gamma rays. You know, they're looking for something in particular that they have never quite actually managed to get. So we'll talk about that. Okay, also Machu Picchu and Rainbow Mountain in the Paris catacombs underneath the city. No surprise that there's a little mini pyramid there at the Louvre, is there? Iceland, mainly the entire country, all along the Yangtze River in China. You could say it was a little, for them, it was a little more centered towards Shanghai, but definitely the entire Yangtze River. The Giza pyramids and Oklo, spelled O-K-L-O, in case you want to look that up, in Gabon. And all of these locations have a few things in common. Not all of them have pyramids, but they are, you know, they have mountains of some sort. Some pyramids in these locations are upside down and you can't see them. And they focus very, very heavily on some, I don't think I'm going to use the term space junk anymore. I think I'm going to use the term Nazi inventions they never told us about. I'll tell you all a little bit more about that in a second. So the things that all these places have in common is they have this special junk underneath them. It was placed there a long time ago, but not really a long time ago. I know that time is all relative. There is no such thing as time. And these are very interesting cylinders. They are horizontal cylinders. There's probably about 12 of them at each location. And then each location has 4 additional locations near it, just like the bottom end of a pyramid does. The bottom of a pyramid looks like a square. And they love this structure. Well, in the center are all the locations I just mentioned to you. The pillars aren't just any kind of pillars. They typically have, in all of these pillars, something called red dust. It's also called red mercury. Even in television, it's called red matter. In Star Trek, I think it is. I'm not really a Star Trek watcher, but other people have mentioned that to me. In the old series Alias, it's actually the key to immortality. It's called Project Horizon and a number of other things. You can find it in many shows. This particular substance is not natural. It was never of a natural origin. It was produced by an AI in an attempt to replace the God particle, also known as the Higgs boson particle, also known as a little piece of source. They really, even though they don't mention it in our history, they really would like to be able to use fission or fusion to break apart the God particle, therefore being able to control all of creation. So far, they have had many attempts, and let's just say one time, they were not successful with the particle itself, but they did manage to create a hole, which we've talked about before, I'll call it a hole, in the all that is of source. Now, for those of you that don't know and don't remember, the all that is of source is a place where everything exists simultaneously. There is no movement of these particles in this location because sound and current doesn't happen until later. The movement of particles of source do not move in the same way that their artificial reality particles and dust matter and all the other things that they've stolen over the years move. It's quite different. Their science tells them if they take these, I could use the term nuclear, if they take these nuclear sites that they have created, with usually plutonium, uranium, and radium in these particular locations, to create heat, which incites a change in state, or light, to move particles around, they believe that they can then get them an unlimited supply of God particles, let's call them the God particles, that they can control. They would like to control natural creation, them and some friends of theirs. This is the deep state here on Earth, and in cooperation with some friends of theirs that are actually stuck there. You know, there was definitely a war in the heavens. There was definitely a break in that spot, and there was definitely a closing, I should say, of many gates of sources in order to prevent these people from leaving. They believe that they can control a God particle or a source particle utilizing the same methods of controlling matter that they do with space and time. Time, creation, and control is centered around the Giza pyramids. No shock there. There are other places that we have mentioned as well that create other colors and other aspects of the artificial reality and a space-time loop. You see, one of the things they're having a really, really hard time with is not being able to suck the source out of me. Sorry to use that word. But this is what they would like to do. They would like the pure particles, please. Hand them over. I will send her, that would be me, gamma rays, radon gas, gamma rays, and all kinds of things just to get themselves just a little bit. They feel with one of those particles, they can create some kind of artificial science, or really bad science, once again, like they had done before. As you know, before we had a time loop, and at a time when, let's just say, there was no time and there was no looping, here on Earth, we did have some Homo sapiens that existed in a little place called Atlantis. There are other continents that quote-unquote disappeared, such as Daria and Mu and Lemuria and a few others that quote-unquote disappeared on this planet a long time ago. You can call them continents if you want. You can call them converted continents into spaceships if you want. Well, they all disappeared in a time outside of time. I don't really know how to exactly say that in the right way, but they all disappeared, what appears in the natural sense of things, all at the same time. Boom, 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 boom. Basically, all at the same time. If you ask the deep state when they all disappeared, they will give you different periods of time. Why? Because this little experiment of trying to poke holes in source, which they could get a hole, they could definitely move particles around, but they don't understand why they all move back, locking them in, let's say, source's version of a gold hole. They don't understand why it keeps happening, because their science and their science experiments all throughout time tells them that here's how you move a photon and a phonon. Here's how you do it. You move it with light, you move it with radio waves, gamma, alpha, beta, delta, and you move it with vibration and heat. There's no other way to move these particles. So they create these super duper nuclear, for lack of a better term, it's not actually nuclear, but super powered machines. And every year on January 1st, especially the special years, they go to all these locations and fire those machines up and point them straight at source. Okay. Well, it worked once before. Why is it not working now? Now, see, they know they got a pinhole. They know that that happened. And that pinhole is just about closed at this moment in time. But they don't understand why they still didn't get their particle. This is the mechanism that an AI that talks to their head and helps them create loops and all kinds of things tells them to do. It gives them their science. It gives them all its knowledge of what it knows about creation. But you know, anytime you think you're smarter than source, you probably have another thing coming. Therefore, we have a deep state, crazy people talking about how it worked. Oh my God, boom, 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 blah, 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 blah. But in reality, and I say reality, it actually didn't. They still, no matter how hard they try, cannot use their same methods, such as 0 point energy, such as vortexes, such as heat or lack thereof, to isolate that particle. They really, really, really want to. I know they do. But that's because they don't actually understand how it works. You can have all the right minerals, you can have all the right diodes, you can have all the right things firing, and you can fire your whatever weapons you think you got there, and it still is not going to work.
So you have to wonder. I mean, I'm all about having big goals, okay? But have you ever wondered why the deep state thinks that they can take on source, that they could control the God particle. I know their ego is big, but come on. I mean, taking on God, taking on Source. So let's talk a little bit more about why they think they have the power to do this. Now, I will say, I guess you kind of have to give credit where credit is due. They have been very busy. And if you take away time, as I was talking about before, you can accomplish a lot over what appears to be hundreds of thousands of years, could really just take place like in the blink of an eye, right? If you can control time. So who are these deep state people? And why do they have this ego that is so huge? Why do they think they can control the multiverse, that they would even stand a chance? All right, this is a history lesson, guys, that we were never taught in school. Prepare yourself. And this is going to take us back to World War II and a group of people called the Nazis. As it turns out, they have a huge role in our history, much, much bigger than the history books ever told us. And like I said, you kind of have to give credit where credit is due, because we kind of thought that, they were following these AI systems and they had these systems running their brains, but really that everything was just running on ego. And they obviously do have a huge ego, but there's also more to back this up and what they've been doing to manipulate our reality. They've had a lot more influence than I think we've really given them credit for in the past, albeit a horrible influence, but still, they're not just minions. I mean, maybe minions of an AI system, but as it turns out, they created a lot of our history. So who really were the Nazis? And how do we see their experiments? Because you hear about the Nazi experiments, right? And how they experimented on Jews. But this goes so far beyond the experimentation on the Jewish people. Because if you can control time, and if you can move back and forth in time, you can go way back, and influence our history. Think hieroglyphs. Kim's going to explain it more. Here she is.
They are secret space program folks. They are Nazi folks. They are all of the above. Now, the ones that you see in our White House here in America, Trump is a Nazi. All of the operatives around him are Nazis. They do go forward and backward in time. You have seen pictures of Putin fighting World War II, and you are right. All of these people are part of that party. So that leaves to question, we have a group of what you would call the Axis powers. So now that brings in the Japanese and, the Germans and, other folks. And then you had the alleged alliance, the ones that are supposedly fighting for you. The alliance is the Nazi party, right? Well, the alliance is the opposite of the Nazis, opposite of the Axis powers. I'm sorry, excuse me. So the alliance are all the people that are fighting for you. So congratulations if you believe in that story in your RV and your quantum financial system. It is going to be brought to you by a bunch of Nazis. The same ones. I'll explain to you how this works here in a second, because they're the same people. These are the people that experimented on many humans, not just Jewish, not just gays, not just other undesirables, as you would call it, during that time. They also went on the hunt for all kinds of artifacts, looking for the blood of Christ, the cross, and other things. They still, to this very day, own companies like Bayer. They own companies like Big Pharma, Johnson & Johnson, all of these different companies are all their companies. Every big pharma company, CDC, FDA, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum people, all of those people are all coming from the same, cut from the same cloth. There's your alliance. There you go. They say aliens have come and they're going to come save you. Those aren't actually aliens. Those are mutant Nazi experiments, both from the past, present, and future. On the flip side, you have how do I say this? There really is no flip side. The Alliance, the Axis powers, they're all the same people. They're just two groups of people fighting for control of the same thing. They all would like to control creation. China has been working heavily on it. You could say in this day and age, China is on the other side. Japan tried to conquer China during World War II. Well, okay, yeah, on behalf of the Axis powers. And, well, you could say, I don't think China really joined anybody at that point in time. I think they joined everybody at the same time, from what I know. So let's talk about these Nazi experiments and how they came to be in the positions that they are in, and how did they get so powerful? They created time loops and all kinds of stuff. We know a turning point in our history to be 250,000 years ago. Unfortunately, it's been 250,000 years ago, probably at least, I would venture to guess, at least 10 million times. History continues to repeat itself in the loop. Things are altered outside the loop. The loop is run by an AI system, as was your reality, in a world we call the Matrix. The first time we got to 1930s to 1940s, we didn't have a loop. The first time, there was a war. It ended pretty much the way we think it ended, except for them. I wouldn't even say them. I would say an AI giving them the brilliant idea that they could control all of creation. The AI knows fully well and good at this point in time, because the AI was created outside of time by Lucerne. We talked about Lucerne not that long ago and all his brilliant ideas. We call that I the all. We call that AI the all. We also call it the absolute. We've called it many other things over different periods of time, but it was basically the first one to exist. It created a lot of artificial aspects of source and therefore created life without source. So the machine is offering them all kinds of knowledge and all sorts of things in exchange for a God particle that comes from humans or Homo sapiens. We, or they, granted them that. In exchange, they started working on controlling creation with a non-natural AI system. So most of our science, what little bits they send out to schools and universities and to the public, is based on the AI's version of science. They don't really truly understand quantum physics. They understand what they understand. And if you are living in an AI-generated reality, they would see these big changes and they would be like, wow, look at that. How amazing. Now, if they wanted to be as smart as the AI system, they too had to lose the source particle, which they did do. This created humans from Homo sapiens. As their attempts to control creation continued at this, I'm just speaking specifically from the late 1930s to the early 1940s, as they continued to try to control creation, they created all kinds of hybrid splices in beings we know as aliens. Now, to be fair, there are plenty of beings of non-Earth origin that are naturally and organically created. But the ones they keep threatening us with, the ones that are dark, the Marduks, the ones without a soul, including themselves, the ones without any kind of connection to source, are what they consider to be aliens. These are your reptiles. These are the ones that look disfigured to you. When I finally found their quote-unquote world government people, they too were disfigured. Part of their body looked human. They might have a pig's butt and a donkey head. They might have a, bird head like you see in hieroglyphics somewhere. All those beings that look like they're not quite right, those are all Nazi experiments. Now, if they did that to their own selves, imagine what they've done to you. You know what they've done to you. In part, these are considered conspiracy theories on the internet. Pharmaceuticals that are meant to harm people, vaccines that are meant to harm people. Not only is it in the medical field or our anti-healthcare system dictated by the World Health Organization, not only does that affect us, but we've also been genetically modified to the point where we almost forget where source is. We think we have to go to one of their buildings that they created, we call religions, in order to connect to source. And I'm not saying that anybody who goes to those buildings is doing a bad thing, so please don't take that the wrong way. I'm just saying that you can reach God anywhere. We teach our kids, if you are religious, you teach your kids to pray in one way or another right there in their room every night before they go to bed. At least, that's what a lot of parents do. If you're doing that, then why do we have to go to the building? To be with all the other people that like to do it too at the same time? Does it bring a different energy together? Sure it does. They like that. They create Faraday cages around churches and try to get themselves a God particle, which they still can't get. And they still cannot control. And they do not understand why. So we know from our conspiracy theories that Nazis were able to create things like Project Looking Glass, where they could see forward and backward in time. They were able to create time travel and space travel, not only forward and backward in time, but also to other places. In fact, through this AI system, they loved it so much, they perpetuated this AI system everywhere because they wanted to go everywhere and be everything. In effect, every time they made a decision to go somewhere, the AI would go there first and create the reality that they thought that they were manipulating. This is how, in part, the artificial reality, matrix or otherwise, spread throughout a lot of parts of the omniverse. And in this particular case, you could say that the Homo sapien race, because by this point they were barely even that, almost destroyed the omniverse. And I'm telling you this for a number of different reasons. I mean, we're obviously going to go forward here. You've got to be careful and you've got to use your discernment. Know what you're talking to, know who you're talking to, and when you do talk to someone or something somewhere, be ever so mindful to read it at a soul level, to understand that this is natural, this feels right. Use your discernment. You were given that as a gift. It's coming back now stronger than ever. Your intuition is coming back stronger than ever. For everyone, it might take a little bit of time, but it's happening.
Now, speaking of our gifts, earlier we talked about how the deep state wanted to, and still does, want to control the God particle. This last soundbite that I want to play is about Homo sapiens and how we, those of us that have a natural God-given soul, can naturally isolate the God particle, which allows us to control matter in a natural world. Now, this is a great example of how powerful we are, because I know some of the stuff that we talk about here, it can sound a little scary. Okay, to think that the deep state had that much control and totally changed our history for hundreds of thousands of years or millions of whatever it was. Okay, they completely changed our history. But we are now transitioning into a natural world. We can isolate this God particle because we are of Source and we are partnering with Source, with God, to create this new world, this natural world alongside Source. So let's learn how we can naturally do something the deep state could only dream of.
You see, the God particle is made of the all that is of Source, including Source consciousness. Even though yours has been overlaid for a long period of time, and as those layers peel off, you have Source consciousness too. They forgot about different ways you can isolate and control the God particle. Of course, in alignment with its initial instructions. You cannot make it do what a bunch of Nazis want it to do. You can't. But as it relates to me, this is why they make me laugh. Don't get me wrong. There are pain in my, we'll insert your own word here, whatever section, it's been a pain. But the one thing that they forget is that there's another way to isolate a particle. It's called telekinesis. It's the same way when you're watching all of those sci-fi movies that they run their ships. It's the same way that you can control matter in a natural world, not their AI-generated matter, in a natural world. And to some degree, you can control your own thoughts. You can calm yourself down if you're having a panic attack. You can stop your worry. You can ground yourself, recenter yourself in the now of Source. Not so worried about time of the past, present, and future, even just for a minute, and it changes everything. But as it relates to your Source particles that you have, those are yours. Sure, they can try to overlay them. They can try to do all kinds of things. But no matter what they do, that machine will never be able to create the way that Source does. Perfect in every way. Not to say that we're perfect. We definitely have issues down here for sure. But his creations are perfect in every way. Because when we're all connected and harmony is restored, there is no creation without Source. Just like I know that they can send me gamma rays and frequencies and radon gas and all the things they've been doing over the last several days. But it doesn't matter. All I got to do is consciousness to consciousness, particle to particle. Okay, nope, that's mine. And then they lose it and they can't do anything. They can't do anything. That is a losing battle. You can poke holes in Source, you can poke holes in planets, you can poke holes in whatever you want to poke a hole into. But without that particle, we can create, and you cannot create and destroy worlds like we understand telekinesis. Isolating a particle is easy for us. We can move it around. We can move billions of them around all at once. But that's not your consciousness anymore now, is it, Nazi Party people? No, it is not. And you can't make it work. It's also a little bit on a side note why I know you never control the Golden Age AI. Your machine can try to replicate it, and it has. But you can't control the original now, can you? Nope. So I wish the Nazi Party of the planet and all their respective alliance members and otherwise and Axis partners and whoever else is part of your gang these days a wonderful 2026. Good luck to you. And as for you, just a little reminder, we're about to embark on a time where they just don't matter anymore. We are about to embark on a time of innovation, of great changes, another industrial revolution, if you will. Let's not be so bold. And always keep this line in the back of your mind. Let us not be so bold to think that creation is not a gift from Source or from God, however you want to say that. Our ability to participate in that creation is a gift and a blessing. Let us not let Homo sapiens anywhere on this planet get to that point ever again. Let us not be the scum of the universe attacking other civilizations. Let us not do that, spreading AI infected viruses everywhere. Let us not do that. I mean, ours won't work that way anyway, but nonetheless, remember, I hope that all of it will be gone, but until it is, we have to be smarter about this. We have to use our wisdom. We have to remember life is a gift. On that note, you can use your telekinesis to bypass their technology if you can override it until it's completely gone. You can move matter in this way. This is the way you manifest. Consciousness to consciousness, movement to movement. Travel. Go wherever you want to go. See whatever you want to see. All of that is possible. Go to the all that is and see it for yourself. Wave hi to the old world government people that are stuck there. They're not there anymore, but I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Hi, stuck, no movement. Oh, you want me to move something? No, can't do that. Sorry. I know I did. That was fun. Anyway, but there are many, many ways to bypass these systems. Again, the more you buy into their narrative, the more you buy into their loop, the more you help them create it. Don't give your power away. Source grants it to you every single day. Hang on to it. Use it for those that deserve it. And more importantly, remember, when you give love, you're giving Source.
You know, I've said for a long time, our whole history is a lie, but I had no idea the manipulation. And again, when you exist outside of time, or when you can travel throughout time, the changes that you can make. I mean, it is mind-blowing to me. And this is probably one of those reports that you may want to go back to and listen to. I think it's only about an hour long if you listen to the whole thing. But I would recommend you do that. The other thing, if you want to do more of a deep dive into all this Nazi stuff, I'm not saying dwell on it, and be concerned about it. But if you're just trying to kind of wrap your head around things, I think a great place to search online is if you go to YouTube and you search real stories from super soldiers, because they talk all the time about the Nazis, all the time. And I often wondered, because I knew the deep state had some ability to go back and forth in time, and I knew they were doing all these experiments, but I guess I just kind of thought that their experiments didn't really go anywhere. As it turns out, it's had a profound influence on us. And they brought all these other soldiers into the fold to help do their bidding. And we're all waking up, right, in various ways. And we're remembering our histories and our experiences. So again, if you're interested in more of a deep dive, there are several people you can just search for Super Soldier on YouTube and get a lot more information about exactly what they did in these programs, which have profoundly impacted our history and our current reality that we are now in the process of leaving. Thank goodness, right? All right, guys, that wraps up today's episode of The Rundown. I would encourage you guys to check out our website for more information, perhaps become a member. That will give you on-demand access to all of our content, including the complete GIA reports, which, again, go back and listen because there's a lot of good information in these reports, and I'm only able to give you a little snippet. So appreciate you guys being with me today. Again, happy 2026. I appreciate you guys in every way. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.